Welcoming DeSci Labs to Jellyfish. DeSci Labs have designed an infrastructure that is accessible to all and controlled by no one. An open protocol where anyone can participate, collaborate, and contribute toward advancing scientific breakthroughs. Welcoming researchers, publishers, institutions, and more, DeSci Labs are scaling to build the next generation of scientific applications on a radically open and extensible protocol. Where traditional research is glooming in static formats, DeSci Labs encourages you to replace them with rich, interoperable ecosystems. When peer reviewing becomes monotonous, DeSci Labs enhances trust in scientific findings by rewarding quality research and open science practices. When freedom of research is limited, DeSci Labs are making credit transparently tracked, allowing authors to accept new collaborators that have contributed to substantially enrich their work. And where research lacks in accessibility, DeSci Labs are making everything trackable, time-stamped, transparent, and owned by creators. And that's just the start. DeSci Labs are empowering researchers to build autonomous communities around their work, scaling impact through qualified referees, fast-tracked peer review, and newly unlocked opportunities. With DeSci nodes, DeSci Labs are protecting institutional sovereignty during the next era of science. Institutions are empowered to own their data, get ahead of the compliance curve, help their researchers improve impact, and accelerate open science. Please welcome John from DeSci Labs, who is here to tell us more.
Awesome. So thank you for joining in, everybody, and John from DeSci Labs. I'm Guy. I'm gonna moderate and ask some questions around crypto, longevity, and everything that's interesting today. We're going to talk about DeSci, which is somewhat of a fairly new idea that's been popping around in the last, I'd say, 2-3 years, since the last kind of bull run of crypto. So yeah, joining in is John from DeSci Labs. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Hi, I am a project manager at DeSci Labs, where we work on everything science. Let's say we work on some fundamental infrastructure that's necessary in scientific processes. So this technology can do things like publishing, reputation, sort of attestations, but like in a peer review flavor, because peer review is very broken, and people talk about that in a little bit. Incentive design, and so much more. So scientific community support and journals, that sort of thing. Beyond DeSci Labs, I work in a lot of different crypto projects and a lot of open source projects in the traditional world, where I do a lot of interesting stuff. But I'll just leave it there to keep it short. I'm very excited to learn more about longevity and how all this ties together through DeSci.
Awesome. Yeah, great introduction. So I personally come from a crypto background. I don't know a lot about science and DeSci per se. I do know somewhat about, the origins of Bitcoin since 2010 in this space. So I know the origins. Yeah.
We're the same cohort.
Yeah, amazing. October 2010. I also watched the first DAO go live and fail, so we can talk about that. But let me ask, just to clarify, because we said that you work for DeSci Labs. What does DeSci really mean?
Oh, what a good question. Worthy of a...
Mutual exploration, I'd say.
Yeah. So DeFi, let's start there. DeFi is a very obvious use case, right? Because that's what Bitcoin was originally. That's what, going back, DigiCash, all these things are trying to do DeFi. Decentralize the financial system, which is a highly centralized system in the traditional world. And so Bitcoin enables the people's currency, and it's open source, so it allows open economic network development, where you can define your own incentives, define your own value set, and tie the incentives to the value set, define your own protocols and economic models. It really lets us build our own societies and nations and things like that, because finance is the underlying protocol for almost all of society throughout history. Whoever controls the money makes the rules. So DeSci is a play on DeFi's words, but you can't bring any of that impact from DeFi into DeSci. But you can think about it sort of this way. So if money is the underlying infrastructure for the way we organize the society, science and that process is the underlying infrastructure. Well, rather, all the processes within science are the underlying infrastructure as to how we generate and translate data through the whole entire stack. So go from data to information to knowledge to understanding and to action. And so that process is actually incredibly decentralized in the traditional world. There's universities all over the world. There's labs all over the world. There's professors there's tens of thousands of people doing research. More than that, it's a huge understatement. The issue is the rules in which this system operates are highly centralized.
Yeah,
So,
and I
like,
argue the incentives as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So if what DeSci is trying to do, rather than change science and decentralize science, like there's an aspect of access to this where, like, yes, we want to give more people access to scientific processes and tools and all that stuff, but we need to decentralize the way that incentives are defined, to your point. We need to decentralize the way that knowledge and libraries and labs are organized, right? So that yes, there's tons and tons of institutions and academic institutions, colleges and labs, but you still need to go to an academic institution or a college or a lab to participate in science. That's where all the resources are. That shouldn't be the case. You should be able to really just kind of contribute to science if you love knowledge and all that stuff. Particularly now that in today's day and age, science and the production and translation of knowledge is highly data dependent. And like you can just use a computer to do some really cool science stuff. So DeSci, to summarize, is trying to affect the incentive structures of science, affect the institutional pillars of science, and to affect sort of the overarching like governance of how science works. Speak to that just really quickly. Like science used to, like it sprung up through scientific societies that just were researchers that decided, back in like 15, 16, 1700s, and just got together and started working together, and they created journals and they created peer review systems, and then that system evolved over time until we have highly centralized governance over this whole process, where we have just a couple of journals that run everything, things like that. So what DeSci wants to do is give that power back to the grassroots, to the scientific societies, to the patients that are directly impacted by medicine, to like the nerds looking through telescopes up at the stars, just cataloging asteroids. Like those are the people who should make the decisions that govern the scientific process, or at least they need to be part of the conversation. It's not that we kick everyone else out, but they just need to be there.
Yeah, I love it. It's a great summary. And when you said some people and some journals control or it's centralized in a way science, I got pings already in my brain. I want to ask who controls it? Why do they do that? Why is science not an open and decentralized, system to begin with? But yeah, go on, please.
Are we crypto left or crypto right here?
Oh, we're open-minded. I mean, it's just you and me. It's just you and me.
So from my perspective, it's because of money. Right? Science, the outputs of knowledge are very, very profitable, can be very profitable. They're impactful to the world. People want to buy medicine. People want to buy cell phones, which is dependent, computer chips, which are dependent on satellites, and which is dependent ultimately on the theory of general relativity, which is dependent on Newton's foundational theories. So it's like, if you can create foundational theory, you can use that to create translated products that can make you a buttload of money. And whoever controls that middle ground can make a lot of money. So you can think of APCs or researchers when they create knowledge or discover knowledge, take your pick there, they would have to pay a journal to publish in that journal. And like that makes journals a lot of money because researchers publish a lot of stuff. They do a lot of stuff because their incentive structure is to publish a lot of stuff. And a lot of the stuff is BS. It's just they're trying to get citation counts up and publish counts up. And so it's all tied together. But these bastions of control, these centralized entities are there because profit. And that profit, it's fair. A lot of it is very fair marketplace economic sort of stuff, but they've monopolized greatly that marketplace. And so if we can empower scientific societies to start spinning up independent journals that can actually survive and not get bought out, then that's where the decentralization comes in. We can kind of open that marketplace up to innovation, competition once again, and maybe through that innovation competition, we realign the incentives of research. So it's not just publish, publish, publish. It's more like publish, reproduce, replicate, prove again, attempt to disprove, find something that is just like a null result, which is incredibly valuable. It doesn't need to be a novel discovery. And then publish again. There's a whole process in order to do this profit model.
Right. Okay, so how would you say DeSci has evolved over I mean, I first heard about DeSci, I think it was 3 years ago. So in those 3 years, what was kind of happening behind the scenes? Because I'm not very much involved with DeSci. I'm more into crypto and longevity more recently. But I am very, very curious to hear from your point of view, what's been happening in the background.
Sure. So we're going to go a little further back than 3 years. The term DeSci probably did first emerge in 2017, 18, or 19. The first DeSci coin was Bitcoin, right? It's just a giant shared database that runs on a computation network, a giant computational network. Those computational nodes are doing cryptography in the background. Cryptography is part of science. Some of the original sort of blog posts or email threads, even from Satoshi, are kind of alluding to how this technology can be used in the scientific system and in its processes. And so it does go all the way back to that. It just wasn't called DeSci. Mm-hmm. Then in the first or second altcoin boom, and how you define these timelines, in 2013 and 14, you start to see the emergence of coins that play with incentives. So there's 3/4. There's Prime Coin, which used the computational power of the network to find giant prime numbers. That's part of science. Math is part of science. Math can be used to produce a lot of really cool stuff. All our computers and our technology depend on some math that was done in the 16, 17, and 1800s. Incredibly foundational research. And then the three others were highly related. They're called Gridcoin, of which I'm original miner of, like, way back then, helped set this thing up in some ways. Mm-hmm. And then there's Purecoin, and then there's Coin.
Purecoin, absolutely. I worked with the core dev at some point.
For which one?
Purecoin.
Purecoin is the underlying...
you didn't say Purecoin.
No. So there's Gridcoin, Purecoin, and Folding Coin. I think all three of them are...
Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so Purecoin is beautiful. Oh, man. Yeah. And Feathercoin, God, I missed that time. So those three coins, are you familiar with protein folding?
Yes, absolutely. AlphaFold currently, right?
AlphaFold, Folding at Home, Rosetta at Home.
Exactly.
There was a project way back when called SETI at Home that did search for extraterrestrial intelligence with your computer, you just hook up to the network and you'd analyze data from the Arecibo telescope. Well, that project, SETI at Home, was started in 1999, evolved into this distributed computing network called the Berkeley Open Infrastructure for Network Computing in 2002 and 3. And after that, Folding at Home came out in about 2003 and 4. And these are just giant distributed computing networks, very much like what Bitcoin is. And once we had this technology that enabled us to build our own economic models, people started to think, well, wait, why aren't we incentivizing these giant distributed computing networks that already exist and work for science and the betterment of humanity? So they did that. And those are those three coins: Gridcoin, Purecoin, and Folding Coin. I think two of which still exist, Gridcoin, and I think it's Purecoin that still exists. And what they do is they secure there's a lot of history there, but ultimately they secure the blockchain on proof of stake. For example, Gridcoin actually bootstrapped proof of work, similar to Ethereum, and then shifted to proof of stake in 2014. Mm-hmm. But once that network's secured, that's the layer to proof of stake, they use their economic protocol to mint a currency and distribute it to people who are contributing computation cycles to scientific project on the Berkeley Open Infrastructure for Network Computing and Folding at Home. So the more compute you contribute to science, the more money you make from this protocol. And it's currency generated It's protocol generated currency. It's not like, there's a company that has a purse and is rewarding people for it. It's an underlying infrastructure for society, minting a currency. And instead of giving it to people for credit and debt, it's giving it to people for scientific production with their computers. It's basically a universal basic income because everyone has a computer at home. So
yeah, that sounds incredible. I'm interested in how come I've never heard about it, and more people should probably hear about it.
Yeah, that is that's a big thing we talk about in the community. But the community is very. We have pushed back against every hype cycle, because we're a bunch of science geeks, and we don't like the pump and dump nature of crypto, right? There's that aspect that's very off-putting.
The crypto bros and the marketing and whatever's going on Twitter. Sorry, X.
Yeah, how dare you? Elon's coming for you. So we put back against a lot of that. All of those communities did, and for that reason, there hasn't been a lot of uptake. But at the same time, like Gridcoin is one of the first 25 coins. I think is one of only 6 remaining from that era. It's one of the largest blockchain networks. I think it's 4,000 to 5,000 nodes. It's probably not as high up on the list as it was back in last cycle, because some of these projects in the space are getting huge. It's amazing to watch. But it is a very large project. It's just not marketed. So that's sort of the genesis of DeSci. It started this culture of blockchain for science that continued through to 2017 and 2019 when smart contracts were part of that cycle. And what smart contracts enabled, I'm sure we're all very familiar with this, is the ability to not have to have a blockchain and still do some really cool economic stuff on top of Ethereum. So that's where DeSci sort of started to accelerate. And you see projects that work with longevity spring up that are doing really cool stuff. You see projects that work with funding DAOs. You see projects that work with the underlying infrastructure, like DeSci Labs, start to develop. Some of this technology is going to be critical to actually get researchers into the crypto space, legacy Web2 researchers into the space. So over the past 4 years, there's been an explosion of kind of enthusiasm and participation in DeSci. You see a lot more DeSci events all around the world on every single continent. And you see a lot more core contributors sticking around through the winters and developing some really cool stuff, developing some really cool programming for events and for workshops and for conferences. You see some larger protocols starting to get involved. So the Ethereum Foundation, I think, is a DeSci page on the website. Filecoin, that ecosystem is very much involved. I think Polygon's involved. Arbitrum and Optimism all as well. Which coin?
Gitcoin.
Gitcoin, yeah. Gitcoin has been a blessing for the DeSci movement. A lot of projects got their start there. We got some initial funding from the communities and were able to get their feet off the ground, so to speak. And we're just now reaching the point in DeSci where it does feel like we're starting to actually connect with some what are called open scientists and open source engineers. I'm sure everyone knows about open source. I'll leave that aside. And open science, for those who don't know, is essentially DeSci, except they've been trying this for decades and they didn't have the technology to do it. So it's opening the scientific process up to a lot of people, sharing your data, sharing your code, that sort of thing. And some of these tools, like the stuff that DeSci Labs is building called DeSci Knows, like some of the funding stuff for the longevity field, are starting to get attention by some practitioners in traditional science. And it feels like there might be a wave of adoption coming, like true adoption of crypto tools from people who don't know they're using crypto, and they're using it in a very important field of our society, which is science. So that's academic institutions, that's governments, and that's, let's say, influential researchers. We could be on the cusp of them adopting some novel tooling from Web3, which is very, very exciting. So that was a very long journey, and I apologize for monopolizing that, but has been here for a long time. It's a very exciting sort of timeline of an evolution of this space. But that's where we're at right now, I feel.
Yeah, don't apologize. First of all, I come more educated from this conversation. Now I know about Gridcoin and the like. So that's already one person you educated. So I'm wondering a bit more about recent projects and DeSci Labs itself. I mean, what kind of boxes are you ticking in the space? Mm, what are you doing basically? Yeah, feel free to go on over this.
Yeah. So, okay, let's go with this route. There's, in the traditional world, there are these things called digital identifiers, or DIDs, or DOIs, digital object identifiers. I think that's what they stand for. There's so much jargon in this world.
Yeah.
So, what these things do is they identify a piece of research. And usually that identifier points only to a manuscript, PDF, of what the researcher did, how they did it, and what their outcomes are. And like I mentioned earlier, a lot of research now is data driven. So like you can't put a data set in a PDF, particularly if there's like millions of entries. You can't put your GitHub repo in a PDF. You can put a link to your GitHub repo, but then when someone searches for the research, they're going to get that DOI, go to the PDF, and then your repo might be dead by the time they're trying to like see your code. And there's this crazy idea where if you use data in your research, hey, other people should be able to access that data so they can reproduce your results and make sure you didn't fake anything. I'm sure a lot of people see all the nonsense with some major discoveries ending up being completely doctored. Like they manipulate the data to get the outcome that will get them elevated in space.
Yeah, that happens in longevity as well, unfortunately. But yeah, please go on.
So I wonder, in longevity, is one of the problems, like the reason that's so easy to do is because people don't share their data and code. So like I can't go and just be like, this is what this person's saying, let me just make sure they didn't doctor things.
Yeah, like I said, I'm not a researcher, but if any researcher is listening, so feel free to comment in the Discord and say what you think about this. But yeah, please go on as to what you do, and sorry I interrupted you.
Not at all. So we have these DOIs that point to PDFs, which can sometimes have data links to them, but are not part of those data links, are not part of the PDF. And a lot of times, actually, because some funders of research actually require the researchers to make their data publicly accessible. And so the way a researcher makes their data publicly accessible, because they just don't have funding for storing it on cloud forever, is they put a line in there that says data available upon request. So if you want to reproduce the results, you have to get in touch with that researcher who's very busy, largely looking for funding because of the incentive misalignment of the system. But they're very busy doing what they do, and they're going to get back to you maybe. Like, and when they do, they'll be like, "Yeah, this is like several terabytes. Let me ship you some hard drives."
Right.
And it's absolutely insane. So, what DeSci Labs is building in some way, we're building several like aspects of this foundational infrastructure. So one of them is addressing this DOI and this data availability and this code availability problem, as well as the identification of the data code. So instead of DOIs, we think things should have DPIDs, decentralized permanent identifiers, where we know as users that once something's given a DPID, it's going to, that DPID is always going to point to the research or whatever asset it's pointing to throughout history, because we have this giant shared database now. I have to explain that one of the problems with the DOIs is a lot of the times the links break and you look for research and you get like 404. And sometimes you even get pointed to completely different research than what was originally assigned to that DOI. It's a good system for, especially considering when it was developed, but it has obvious flaws that need to get fixed one way or another. So DPIDs are one way to fix these things. And another thing you can do with DPIDs is point to granular assets and parts of research. So you can make a DPID point to a very specific line in a manuscript or a very specific line in code. And you can make a DPID point to the manuscript or the code or the data. And another way you could do this is you could have a root DPID pointing to the research object. And a research object is the collection of every asset involved in research. So the manuscript, which hopefully will become less important because now that research object also has the data and the code and the videos about the lab work and the plan for research before researchers actually implemented and the community discussion. All of this compiled into one research object with one DPID, and then that one DPID can be broken into a tree of various that, and each sub DPID points to one asset of that research object. So it makes it very easy to discover a very specific part of a very specific piece of research. And you're guaranteed that you're always going to find that thing when you use a DPID.
Okay, so you were talking about something very technical. Can you please speak in a higher level? Like, how is this going to affect research, or I don't know how you see it, but in a yeah, okay.
So one of the big problems, this type of system, so this is a foundational tech that will affect a lot of different parts of research. One of the ones I'm most excited about in particular is the incentive misalignment within research. So a lot of this stuff is very interconnected, it's very complex, but if we can simplify it this way. Researchers are given career advancement because in large part of their citation count. If I publish a piece of research, which remember is just a PDF, and that PDF is cited in a lot of other research, it can be assumed that my original PDF is very important to the knowledge web of humanity. Right? A lot of other research depends on my original research. There is some truth to that, but that's the one of the, that's, I'm not confident saying that's the only incentive, but that's the major incentive for researchers. So if that's the major incentive, people are going to gain that. They're going to find out ways to cite, to produce research that gets cited as much as possible. They're going to produce a lot of research so that even if all of the research only gets cited once, if they have 1 million articles getting cited one time, they have 1 million citations. They'll game the system to elevate their career. And the way they do that is publish, publish, publish.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if your goal is to make a manuscript and not necessarily good data and good code, because you're not rewarded for creating good data and good code, because you can't cite data and code. You're not going to make good data and good code. Your code is going to be garbage. You're not going to want to publish it because it's going to be garbage. You're going to be scared what people think of it. And you're not going to want to publish it because, again, you don't get rewarded for publishing. So with DPIDs, you can cite someone's code and data directly. You don't need to cite just the manuscript. You don't even need to cite the manuscript at all, which is why I hope manuscripts go away. That's a personal hope. But if people because you can use DPIDs, points directly to data and code and very specific parts of data and code. You can cite those very specific parts of data and code. And because you can cite those very specific parts of data and code, a researcher might be more incentivized to share that data and code. And because they're going to be sharing that data and code, they're going to make sure that data and code is produced to the best of their ability. And that means that, first of all, the science gets better, but their citation count goes up, their career advances for citing, for producing data and code. And once we have data and code, we can reproduce research and we can verify that things are true when they're produced, and we can build on each other's research much more quickly. We'll have open data sets, so like we don't need to run the same research twice, collecting essentially the same data set. We can continuously build on a single data set of a piece of research because we can maintain the versionability throughout these DPIDs. I started to get technical again, but the basic idea here is the incentives can be realigned to incentivize researchers to share data and code pretty simply with DPIDs.
Okay. Yeah, I don't forgive you for being technical. I'm sorry. No, just kidding. But you are a technical person after all, and yeah, that's what we have. But let me change the subject a little bit. So we are a longevity community. What we do is help incentivize movies about longevity and other, pieces of media. And obviously this talk as well should be a little bit about longevity. So let me ask you as our guest, What do you know about longevity? What kind of trends are you noticing in this space, in the research space, in the technical space? Whatever you want to talk about, feel free in the sense of longevity.
So another aspect of DeFi is the ability to raise funds for research that might be considered too fringe for a traditional funder, something like the NSF, NIH, or even pharmaceutical companies. So one of the really cool things that I'm seeing that relates to longevity is these DAOs, these funding DAOs that are raising not insignificant amounts of money to do fringe research in longevity. So there's one called SciDAO that researches psychedelic. There's one called VitaDAO. That's the big one that focuses purely on longevity. There's one called CryoDAO that works on cryogenics. And all of these are raising money to do some pretty fringe research into this interesting sort of field of body hacking to extend life, right? And it's a lot of fun to see. I personally enjoy the discussions on whether or not this is something we as a society should be doing. How we can,
we can talk about that. If you want, we can get into that. I mean, I'm all for it. But
yeah, that would be fun. There's a lot of questions around this and sort of ironies, looking to biohack while smoking cigarettes, sort of thing. But yeah, that's so. I think longevity is a huge part of DeSci because it is currently a kind of fringe research. It's on the cutting edge of stuff, and it can't get funded by traditional means. And people are raising, like I said, not insignificant amounts of money, it's like millions of dollars to do research in a community way, not connected to longevity, but connected to that in a community way aspect. Is this DAO called HairDAO, where they're really doing like experiments with their community, and it's a very cool experiment in the reemergence of a scientific society, truly from the bottom up. And they've raised a good bit of money and have funded some research. And I think they have some products out, and it's very transparent and a lot of fun to watch. They've got a fantastic meme.
Amazing. So yeah, we can either go into more longevity, or if it's not your field or cup of tea, we can talk about DeSci, what to see in the future, how 5 years from now are we going to see different research being carried out, what kind of social organizations are going to be around DAOs, how do you see the DAO? Feel free to pick on any of those questions. And
how much time do we have?
I guess we have another 27 minutes. So feel free to pick on any of those subjects and go.
I'm curious about your perspective on longevity and how it's utilizing Web3 and where it's kind of going.
Yeah, listen, I'm going to simplify. I read so much about longevity. I listened to so many smart people talk about it. My simple kind of way to break it down is I want to live more. I want to live to tomorrow, okay? At least that, right? If I'm going to change my mind at a certain point, I want to have the ability to seize and stop my life. I know it's a very philosophical kind of topic, but I mean, I think of longevity as basically something everybody wants. They want to live, they want to love, they want to have their relatives live longer. So I don't see it as a bad thing as, some media portrays it. That's what we're trying to do at Jellyfish also, try to paint it in a positive kind of light. But yeah, I think, the amazing science that's been, pushing us forward as humanity allows us to, have this call, for example, from two different continents, or, save lives of children sick with cancer or whatever, right? You can name so many benefits to science. I think longevity science is kind of the ultimate frontier, because once we are, living longer and healthier, we can also do more. We can explore more. We can explore the limits of science, the limits of knowledge, the limits of space. There's so much we can do. So yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on the philosophical, the way I see it. And for the other half of your question, I think crypto advanced us as a society a little bit, not a lot, because there are a lot of degenerates out there, but it allowed us to see that, the system as it is fundamentally broken in a way. that money is obviously centralized. There are people who control it. And if somebody has control over you, you have a limited say in certain aspects of life. So yeah, you talked about UBI for a second. This springs to mind as well. This is something that I truly believe in, and I think will happen at some point. Yeah, money is the way to start fixing things. So we started with Bitcoin and the other millions of coins that are out there. Some of them useful, some of them not. I think longevity will be the next step where people with the educated knowledge of money will choose to put forth their efforts because simply they would want to live more, they would want to explore more, and everything else that I said. So yeah, that's in short what I think about it.
And do you think I don't know what to call them, but like the health projects where you run and you submit your running data and you get currency for that, are those part of longevity?
So I'm not familiar with too many of them. You can name some.
I'm also not familiar. I think Stepin is one, but I'm not very familiar with a lot of these projects. Oh, Sweat is another. I'm remembering as I'm saying, I don't remember it. Stepin and Sweat, those are two projects I think, that do health analytics for rewards.
Okay, yeah, I think I've heard of sweat coins and the like, where basically you can submit your data and get a financial reward. As of all projects, I think they are supposed to be as large as possible, right? Because otherwise the data is insignificant and the payment is insignificant. So none of them caught my eye just yet. I'm sure there will be more of these efforts in the future. It's a recurring theme. But yeah, as of now, none of them seem to kind of get my attention. But as we have more wearables and technology that seamlessly blends into our lives, I suppose even the big tech companies could maybe offer you some, I don't know, YouTube Premium for sharing your data, something like that. But yeah, that's what I think about it.
Yeah, so the reason I ask is because longevity to me is like it's not necessarily adding years to the end of your life. It's adding good years to that last phase of your life. So
Right.
you want to live as well as you can till the day you die. And there's another project that does really good work on this with women's health called Athena DAO, where they're doing women's research, which is just largely underfunded for the past infinity years. And it's just about learning how the body works and why aging happens, and how we can reduce suffering at the end of our lives. And from that perspective, when I ignore the painless live forever aspect of longevity, I love longevity because our world is aging, our population is aging, and they're living longer, but they're not living better. A lot of people end up in hospitals or hospice, and our system in the U.S., and I know it's a very shitty system here, but our healthcare system over here cannot handle the load that we're putting on it. So if we can find ways to live better those last decades of our lives where we're not straining the resources we have as a collective society to care for an aging population with dementia and Alzheimer's and all these terrible diseases, that would be beautiful. If that's the outcome of longevity, I love longevity. And I think one of the ways to do that is through what you're saying with wearables. We need more data for this type of research. And the result of everyone producing data that is used to produce valuable products at the end state is that the people that produce the data should get a trickle back reward from the product that's sold. So we do this with Gridcoin in a way. If the research you contribute to, your GPU to, is used to produce something that can be sold to millions of people and makes billions of dollars, you should get a couple pennies. And if you're just running your GPU all day, which is fine when we do that anyway, it's a way that we as a society can all contribute to something meaningful that advances our society and our quality of life, which is, I agree with you, that's all we want. Live, laugh, love. As much as I hate those banners.
No, that's cliches are a good way to, summarize information that you've learned from so many inspirational sources. Let's put it like that.
So if we can all contribute to use the resources we already have, which is compute resources at this point, or like our heartbeat, and use that information and that data to produce valuable products and get rewarded for producing those valuable products. And those valuable products are largely produced through automation and AI. God, life would be amazing, right? We get ABI, we get better technology. Yeah.
More free time to learn actually and to talk and connect with people and do whatever. But let me we're getting into the utopia kind of vision of longevity. Let me bring us back to the current reality. What in DeSci Labs are we seeing right now that what is going to happen with DeSci Labs in the next year? What besides your technical kind of product that you offer, are you seeing more need for it? I understand that you have developed this already or not. Please clarify.
There's a lot that's largely developed already. Like you can use our software to publish research objects and give them DPIDs and do some really cool stuff. And we're just at this point starting to add features to the underlying infrastructure that enables you to do all this stuff. And to tie this to by longevity, the next year, 2 years, 3 years. So let me give you a foundational feature that like you can do with labs, which is this attestation. So when someone, let's say you produce a piece of research and you say that the thing you have done is collected data, run some code over it, and gone to a wet lab and produced a medicine. And you say that when you take this medicine, you live forever. It's immortality called sexually. I am not going to trust you unless someone I trust, and probably a bunch of people I trust, say that verify, essentially speak to the veracity of your claims. They say, yes, this person did the proper research, they did it well, they didn't doctor anything, and their outcome, their conclusions of the outcomes are reasonable. They're a reasonable conjecture of all this new knowledge and understanding. So that is called an attestation. So you could have, let's think of just the big institutions for now. You could have Harvard attest to your research and say the data and the code is reproducible. The process is great. The work in the lab was done well. All that stuff. And if Harvard, MIT, the Berkeley system all attest to it, then I'm probably going to believe what you say instead of the current reality, which is like, it's kind of hard to believe anything gets published because everything is retracted every week.
Right. And so you try to talk to the universities and research organizations? Like, what is their kind of feeling about this?
Well, we're not quite there yet. This is just laying the groundwork for example. So that's the feature, right? The ability to attest onto a piece of research as an entity or as an individual with trust already. So in the next couple years, and this speaks to sort of the community aspect that I spoke about earlier. These DAOs that are raising money and doing research and are forming the beginnings of scientific societies. Once again, it's a shame we have to do this all over again, but they might be interested in using this sort of attestation format on top of this research object where the data and the code and all that stuff is available, and start attesting to research and saying, I, as a community, VitaDAO or HairDAO or AthenaDAO, think that this research is relevant to my community, first of all, and second of all, is done well. And what done well means is up to that community to define. And a lot of them will probably define it in some series of steps. And two of those steps will almost certainly be the code is available and the data, or the data is available and the code is available. And then the third attestation there is completely reproducible. If I run the code over the data, I get the same result. And then they can add so many more steps into that claim of veracity of this research. And that is very powerful. The way that's done right now is through publishing houses that are very difficult to trust because, like I've said, they've broken that trust so many times. And that is something I think we'll start to see in the next couple of years, particularly in DeSci at large, and particularly because of some of the technology that DeSci Labs is building. It's to one-line it, it's the empowerment of scientific societies in a Web3 tech stack. It's going to be beautiful.
Sounds beautiful. Yeah, I'm excited about what's happening in this space. Okay, it's the last part of the conversation, so let me get into a more personal level. what inspired you, you know, to get involved with all that stuff? Because it sounds like you were in crypto in the beginning, right? Yeah. So please go tell me about your personal story and how you fit into this DeSci world.
Yeah, Star Trek is the simple answer. But nice. So truly, I went to Occupy Wall Street. Like 2008 was an eye opener for me in terms of how the world works, the global financial crisis, etc. And going to Occupy Wall Street was like, oh, okay, there's a bunch of people thinking about different sort of aspects of our society, and money is a big part of it. Right? And there's people experimenting with different ways to do money. So this is like 2010 through 11, 12. Occupy Wall Street was weird and long, but also very short. Weird time. So that got me into crypto, into Bitcoin, exploring what this thing is. And then Star Trek, like I grew up with a scientific background. Not like I'm researching myself, but my family loves science. So science was all around me all the time. So I'm like, all right, how can this stuff, how can we combine science and money? And I'm riding the high off of OWS, where it's like, debt is a very bad system. Debt and credit is a very bad system to run an entire financial empire on. What if we could integrate science somehow? So you get paid from the central bank for doing science instead of creating debt. And so that launched me into Gridcoin, where the community was amazing, still is amazing. I talked about high level philosophical things without the degen aspect of crypto, and particularly how to tie science to this economic layer and this decentralized technology. And then as the space began to emerge further outside of these original chains, I just wanted to help it move along as much as I could. So I found all the projects I love. And unfortunately, I love all the projects. I don't have enough time, but DeSci Labs is amazing and works on infrastructural technology, which is going to be critical to a lot of the other things that DeSci wants to accomplish. So that's, for me, a great place to spend time. But for anyone interested in getting in this space, really quickly, there's so much. Perfect. There's so much in this space now. And truly, from 2013 to like 2017, 18, there were less than half a dozen projects and 3 major ones. After that, there's actually been an explosion of different ways you can contribute to merging science and Web3. There's these funding DAOs, there's infrastructural tech, there's a bunch of projects that focus on peer review and solely peer review. There's a bunch of projects that work on journals and publication. And you can dive even deeper and get into some of these open science communities that have been trying to build this tech without blockchain for decades, 70s, 60s. And they have to some degree succeeded. And for example, there's this technology called nano publications that is basically a shared database, shared ledger, does not use any VLP. It's not VLP as we understand it. It's completely different architecture, which is just really interesting that 2 solutions emerged at almost the exact same time, one being blockchain and one being their nanopub architecture. And the people in open science are amazing because they've been working at this forever. They have so much experience and knowledge to share. And then you can take that and bring it to these Web3 communities and help them build even better, build faster, be more successful at what they want to do. One of the easiest spots to get involved is probably one of the funding DAOs. Find a niche that you're very passionate about. And again, a lot of them are largely fringe science. There's one called Moon DAO. It's a pretty big one that works on space travel. But start to get involved with it and go in from there.
Yeah, exactly. That would be my kind of last question to finish. If people are hearing this and are interested in DeSci or to learn more, where can they find good information, you know, the one that you recommend, and how could they get involved? What, you know, advice would you give to technical people versus non-technical people? And yes, go for it.
Technical, we need both of you, technical and non-technical people. So there's a lot of technical challenges when it comes to DeSci, as there is with every field in crypto. And most of them are unique to DeSci. There are some that span across the entire Web3 stack. Those are very interesting challenges. But there are a lot of really, really cool challenges to address and to keep you entertained for months, if not years on end. And then for the non-technical, there's a need for communication and community growth and engagement. And communication, particularly similar to what I understand you're doing with Jellyfish now, in terms of like framing what this tech is and how it relates to this field in a palatable way for the general public. Like longevity isn't just this extreme utopia fringe stuff. It's actually practical. It's making life better, not just longer. Like all the stuff you guys are doing, we need that with all of DeSci as well. And we also need science communicators, people who are capable of bridging the language barrier between researchers, developers, and the general public. Because researchers speak a very, very specific language. And each domain within research, within science, has their own very, very specific language. It's a very interesting space. And then developers, if they're technically minded, speak a very technical language, right? And then the general public speaks neither. So the ability to communicate across those three archetypes, for lack of a better word, is very important. In terms of direct resources, there's a Telegram channel called Blockchain for Science. There's at least 1,000 people in there, where it's a great place to ask foundational questions and begin your journey. Aaron, who set this up, Aaron McGinnis, who set this call up, is a great resource in general. she worked on a couple projects in the space and is setting up a sort of fellowship program to help address some of those issues I just highlighted. I'm happy to personally connect people where I think they should go, or just PM me resources. Like I don't have links right off, but there are a bunch of people in the space that you'll find in the blockchain program that are just there's wealth of wells of knowledge. Let's go with that, and we'll direct you where you need.
Amazing. That could be very helpful for some people. Definitely, as time passes, this whole ecosystem is going to grow. More people are going to get involved. More scientists in DeSci, more institutions. Yeah, we definitely envision a very interesting future. So thank you very much for being with us.